cabin was built in 1835, it was unique in the city. There were probably 750 establishments or buildings in the city, most of them commercial, but most residences were one story. This two-story was highly unusual in 1835. It was also the year that John Wood built this beautiful 14-room, two-story log cabin that was certainly unique in the Midwest. It was the first Greek Revival home in Quincy and the first Greek Revival home in the center part of the nation.
All right, we're going to walk on in and take a little tour of the mansion. All right, I'm going to follow him. I always love the front of this mansion. You may remember Arts Quincy sent out a great postcard of a local artist, did a watercolor for our Christmas card last year. And the porch was just redone, is that right, Reg?
Yes. The porch has been redone. The house has been refurbished by the Historical Society, the volunteers and contributors. And I might point out that in 1907, this house was to be torn down by the city of Quincy.
Oh.
But the Historical Society's secretary, a little lady named Louisa Meritz, and John Wood's oldest son, Daniel, prohibited that. They prevented that. And exactly 100 years later, in 2007, the Association of Independent Architects named this one of the most important historic structures in Illinois.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I should say for people tuning in as we go along, if you have questions, please ask, and I will look at them in the comments and pass them along, and we'll do our best to answer them. Welcome to the mansion. Go right in here.
Into the front parlor. And I might say the most important or impressive piece in this room is the painting, the portrait done of John Wood shortly after he was governor in 1860 for 1 year. It showed up in Quincy at the riverfront one day. Nobody knew what it was, but it came to the mansion. So if you see it and get to Springfield, don't tell people we have it. I would point out this is a replica of the table that General Lee, Robert E. Lee, signed his surrender on in Appomattox. But it also has contemporaneous pieces. John Wood's had his cane and what I call, and kids love, the first laptop.
The first laptop. Let's see it up close here.
Yes.
Very cool.
And he took that with him in 1849 to California. He and about 20 men left Quincy, went to California in the California Gold Rush. They were highly unsuccessful and they returned to Quincy, most of them.
And I've always loved this piano. This is one of the oldest pianos in Quincy, am I right?
Yes, it's the oldest, actually the oldest piano in Illinois, we're told. It came after a number of years. The woman who owned it was very concerned about how it would be treated, and she made sure that the Historical Society would treat it well. It was built by the brother of John Jacob Astor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in New York, and it was purchased there, made its way to Quincy with the first superintendent of the Illinois Veterans Home. And you can see that is the trademark
Astor
and the patent
Company,
pending for the Astor piano.
And I have to stop and talk about the couch too, because this is one of my favorite little items in the mansion.
Yeah.
Made of?
This is called a second Empire, or if you're an aficionado, a second Empire couch. If you go to Springfield to the Lincoln Home, you'll see a similar couch. You'll see similar couches there. The material itself is horsehair.
That's right.
It's been replaced here, obviously, for this couch, but because horsehair, when it starts splintering, gets like pins.
Very
sticky. But it is a horsehair second Empire couch.
Very cool.
Of about the 1860s.
All right, I'm going to follow you to the next room.
The family room, which has 6 or 7 doors, and when it's closed, the family could zone the heat. That fireplace would provide a lot of heat for the children. All the floors, as you see here, are original yellow pine, some planks as long as 16 feet. The important thing, I think, here in this room is the picture of John Wood's first house. This was at 3rd and Delaware in Quincy, a 1-room log cabin. And the people who you see around it were actually residents of that place with him. Those were the Jeremiah Roses. And Wood, who was highly utilitarian, knew that if Mrs. Rose was with him, She would cook, she would clean, she would launder his clothes, and that took care of the stuff that he had to have done for him that nobody else would if they weren't there. But they lived with him for a few years until the woman in that room there, Ann Streeter, married John
Peeing around.
Wood
Sorry about that, guys.
in January of 1826, and she insisted that they occupy that cabin by themselves without the Roses. So the Roses built another cabin about like that at what today is 12th and Chestnut.
Very cool.
And the last remnant of that cabin is this log, this small piece of a log that was actually used in the first cabin John Wood owned in Quincy, which would have been built in 1822.
You've got quite a faculty for dates. That's never my thing.
And this was the official governor's office for Illinois between March of 1860 and February of 1861. Wood was the first Republican lieutenant governor elected in Illinois with William Bissell. And Bissell, 3 years into his office, died, which meant that the lieutenant governor became the governor. And the government basically folded up when at the end of the legislative session each February. And so Wood got permission from legislative leaders to come back to Quincy. He saw no reason to stay in Springfield. And he made this his official governor's office. That was his desk, his humidor. He did smoke and chew. And on the floor is a spittoon where he spit the
turtle?
The turtle.
No kidding.
Yes. He
Oh, come on. That's so cool.
flipped the shell, spit, and then flipped the shell back down.
I did not see that coming. Very cool.
But what he did, you can see the arch in this room. This had been the south side of the house. And what he did is took this wall out, extended this room to the south side of the porch, and made it a larger room. And people who had business with the governor would come into the door back there and do their business with the governor. These two doors would be closed, and when they were finished, they would leave, and he'd reopen the doors to the house.
Reg, we got people from Kansas, Iowa, and Quincy watching today. If you guys have any questions as we're going along, please do ask, and I will pass them along.
Okay. I will tell you, this does not belong here. This is a fainting couch, which during the Victorian period, which started about 1835, also 1837, I think. Queen Victoria and women of that day wore very tight corsets. And on a hot day, those corsets wouldn't allow them to breathe enough oxygen. And they tended to faint. And there were in Victorian homes like this, fainting couches. And I happen to know that the fainting couch is inappropriate here in John Wood's office because I happen to know John Wood never wore a corset.
That's good historical facts right there.
Yes. You'll learn something here.
This is probably my favorite room in the mansion.
Yes, this is the main parlor, and I might say that this house was actually built one block to the west at 11th and State Street. We're at 12th and State, and it was built one block to the west. John Wood actually built another home in about 1857 or thereabouts, and wanted to put it where his house existed at that time. That was this house. So he moved this house a block to the east. And the way he did it, he had the house cut in half, which was right along this wall. And one half of the house was moved, and then the other half moved. And the young engineers, the young Germans who helped him move it, wanted to just cut through a hedge that was on the front part of this property along 12th Street. And he denied them that opportunity. He had them instead build a ramp, a 12-foot high ramp over that hedge. And it took 20 teams of horses, but he pulled the house half by half over the hedge and set it on the foundation that it exists on today.
That's amazing.
Amazing story. My favorite piece in the house is this piece here. It was not the Wood family's, but it was a contemporary on the other side of the political fence. This was the hutch in the White House between 1828 and 1836, which was occupied then by Andrew Jackson, who founded the Democratic Party. John Wood was of the other persuasion. He was a national Republican. Jackson founded the Democratic Republican Party. in the country in 1834, I believe it was.
So this
But
was
this
in
was
the
a
White
bunch-
House. That's amazing.
It was there. And the neat thing about all these pieces is the Historical Society does have the provenance for most of the pieces they have. We have the provenance for this, which was in the White House. It was sold to a dry goods merchant in Philadelphia who sold it to a gentleman from Springfield. And his child married a young lady from Quincy, and that's how it made it here. And after that, made it to the Historical Society. There are many things we could point out in this room. We've got the
Portraiture.
yes, Sarah Denman, and I'm trying to remember her husband's name. But anyway, Sarah was the founder of Blessing Hospital, and
Matthew.
her husband, Benjamin Denman, I think it was. Anyway, Mr. Denman was a real estate speculator, as many were in Quincy in the 1830s. This was part of the large military tract which ran from the confluence of the Mississippi and Illinois rivers at Grafton, all the way up to Warren and Henderson counties.
So if you have any kids at Sarah Atwater Denman School, this would be Sarah Atwater Denman
That's
herself.
her.
Yeah, amazing. All right.
Matthias Denman was her husband's name.
Matthias, right.
Yeah, the organ was given to the society by the family. It was never here when the Woods were here. But it makes a nice contemporary piece, probably 1870s or 1880s when it was built and used.
And you pump it with your feet. I don't know if you've ever seen this kind
Yes,
of organ.
it had an air bellows.
Air bellow. Yeah, very cool.
When this house was moved, there had been actually a wall here, and Daniel Wood, who got the house, had a wife who didn't want the wall left there, and so what she did, she left the wall out because she wanted to entertain people of Quincy in this dining room. So she'd have big meals here, and this was her oak table, and you can kind of get a sense of how much shorter people were in that day. I'm 6'2". This probably would have been built for a person of like 5'6" or 5'7", or that.
So my size.
And the table has 11 leaves, and it will extend across this room. And the Historical Society does have the leaves, and they've extended it across this room for banquets. The other thing I'd point out here, this was the table that belonged to John Hay, who was one of the first two personal secretaries of Abraham Lincoln. Hay, Wood, and Lincoln were all very much acquainted. Abraham Lincoln was the guy who nominated John Wood for the lieutenant governor position on the first Republican ticket in Illinois, and that would have been in 1856.
And before we started today, you were telling me a little about today is an auspicious day regarding Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, we are here on April 14th. In 1865, April 14th was Good Friday. That was the evening that John Wilkes Booth assassinated Abraham Lincoln. In the following Sunday, which was Easter Sunday, Mr. Lincoln was remembered and resurrected in every northern pulpit in the nation.
Very neat.
Interesting stuff. These are the Tilsons. That's John Tilson, who was the second largest landholder in Illinois. And this is Christiana Holmes Tilson, his wife, whom he brought here after having met her just 3 or 4 weeks. He had been here for a couple of years, was very lonely, went back to Massachusetts, found her and married her immediately, brought her out, and they moved into a log cabin in Hillsboro. And in the early 1830s, they moved to Quincy as his business in speculating in land came to Quincy, because this was where the land office registry was for federal land that he was buying.
Place sitting here. Anyone has any questions, please do ask them in the comments, and I will pass them along.
And this was the family dining room. That was the more formal parlor, and they could eat there, but this was where the family most often ate. The most important piece in this room, I think, is this table, which had belonged to Orville Hickman and Eliza Caldwell Browning. The Brownings lived at 7th and Hampshire, where St. Boniface had been. And Lincoln, in October of on October 13th, 1858, was in Quincy to debate Stephen Douglas, who had been a resident of Quincy for 7 years. And before the debate, the Republican women of Quincy invited him or had him at lunch at the Browning House. And so Lincoln reputedly sat at this table. I haven't verified that, but that's the story. This was certainly in the Browning House at the time, so it's possible. Browning himself, who really was jealous of Abraham Lincoln, who had less than 1 year of education, but was a brilliant person and a good lawyer. Browning had gone all the way through law school in Kentucky, and he was always sort of jealous at this route because Browning was much more dandified than Lincoln, who was making it politically, and Browning didn't have quite the acumen Lincoln did. Browning on this day, October 13th, 1858, found a reason to go to Carthage and was away from the debate. He didn't witness the debate between Lincoln and Douglas. The other piece I point out is this, which belonged to Congressman Isaac Newton Morris of Quincy. The interesting thing about Morris was he and Ulysses S. Grant grew up in the same town in Pennsylvania. They were good friends even to the time when Grant was nominated for the presidency. Grant was extremely worn out by his campaign, and so he was invited by Morris to come to Quincy and relax. Grant came to Quincy. Morris had him busy from the time he got here till the time he left a week later, and Grant said as he left, he wished he'd never come. So, one other piece I point out, this had belonged to Dr. David Nelson, who founded the Mission Institute, an abolitionist college in Quincy. Nelson had been a minister, was run out of Missouri. He founded Marian College just north of Palmyra, was trying to raise money for his abolitionist school, and you didn't try to raise money for an abolitionist school in a slave state, which Missouri was at the time. And so he moved to Quincy, but this was a hutch that belonged to the Nelsons in Quincy.
And the Institute was a no and stop on the Underground Railroad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
This was what's called the warming kitchen, and it was the warming kitchen because actually the food was all prepared in a small facility out back. The purpose was if the food caught fire or the house, the building might catch fire, it wouldn't take the whole house down. So what would happen is they'd prepare the cooked items out back, bring them inside, put them on this small stove, and this stove is lent to us by the Comstock Castle Stove Company, which was founded in Quincy in 1838. And John Spake is still the president of that company. It was his ancestor that founded it in 1838. So nicely, we have one of the original pieces of manufacturing manufactured here in Quincy in its earliest industrial days. The first dry sink in Quincy is here. The first inside dry sink. There wasn't plumbing, obviously, in 1835, so they built a copper sink, and this pumped from a cistern out in the back of the house, pumped water into the sink. They could add hot water and do what they needed to, and then they would use buckets to carry it out. But the first dry sink in Quincy. And we can go upstairs.
Well, I think maybe we'll let that sit for. Oh, I tripped over the stove. I'm sorry. Can you maybe just touch on some of the other things besides upstairs? We'll maybe talk about upstairs just a little bit, and then the livery and the Lincoln Gallery.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, just a few more things here I might point out. This lamp is probably very close to me. It bespeaks hospitality of the time in Quincy. It belonged to the Woods, and when the lamp had the candle lit inside and hung outside on this portico, the south portico, it told anybody who went by they were welcome to come in. And if you were just thirsty, you could come in and get a drink. If you were hungry, you could come in and get a meal. If you were sleepy and tired, you could actually come in and sleep if this lamp was outside. It bespeaks the tremendous hospitality of people who welcome their neighbors and friends or strangers at any time of the day or night. Upstairs, we have directly above us is the maid's room, and one room just to the west of that, which is the front of the house, one room just west of that is a room in which young girls slept. The Woods and a number of the towns, the Bushnells, the Brownings, and others here, were extremely hospitable to children as well. The Woods had as many as 18 girls living upstairs at one time, and those girls were given to them or sort of put to them when their families were too indigent or the families were too big to take care of them. And so the older girls would teach the young girls how to sew, how to cook, and do domestic stuff. And each of those girls had chores around the house, so they paid their way, so to speak. And the Woods got that service for providing shelter and clothing and food to those young women. There was one boy, and he was in a room that was separated from the 18 girls. The boy was 13 years old, so he was reaching a point where girls became more attractive. The Woods made sure he could not reach them by putting him in a room whose only exit was to the outside. His name was William Kirksig. He lived with them until he was mature and adult and went off on his own and had learned enough from Wood to become fairly wealthy himself. On farther is a guest room where John Wood's sister Clarissa from New York would come a couple of times every year, spend several weeks or a month at a time. She loved Quincy, was very active. Her town of Sempronia, New York was a very stable town, and so she loved being here. The girls, I'm sure, were fun for her too. Upstairs also is the first indoor restroom facility, I would say, first bathroom in Quincy, and it has a long 6-foot copper and zinc bathtub that Wood bathed in. Of course, there was no running water, and so the girls would be used to bring hot water to put in the tub, and then they would eliminate that at the end of when he finished his bath. And then if we went to the front two rooms are a boys' room and a girls' room. The boys' room has my second favorite piece in the house, and that was the personal desk of John Quincy Adams, the President of the United States, for whom our city Quincy is named, and who, one of my favorite stories about the guy is when he was president, swam each day in the nude in the Potomac River. And anyway, that desk up front is sort of the counterpiece to the hutch we saw in the main parlor that belonged to Andrew Jackson, because it was John Quincy Adams who beat Andrew Jackson in 1824. Jackson won the plurality, which means the popular vote, but John Quincy Adams won the electoral vote. Sounds familiar these days. But that's when Andrew Jackson started the Democratic Party in the country and then beat Adams in the next election. So we have the personal desk up there of John Quincy Adams from Massachusetts.
Rich Kepner chimed in. The clock here apparently belonged to William Kirksig.
This clock?
Yeah.
Might have. I didn't know that.
Yeah, says John Wood, officially unofficially adopted son.
Yeah.
Absolutely, very cool. So if visitors come during normal functions, what can they expect and what else might they see here at the mansion that we did not touch on today?
Well, they would have seen my third favorite piece in the house, which are the slippers, a pair of white calfskin slippers that John Wood on January 26, 1826, gave his new wife, Anne Streeter, for her wedding present.
Now, are these upstairs?
They're upstairs on the bed.
Maybe we should follow you upstairs. He's tempted me by upstairs. I thought maybe we would cut here, but let's go ahead and go upstairs. Okay. We'll point out a couple of these things. I've got to see this desk. We're gonna go upstairs, guys. It's gonna bobble for a second. I'm gonna try to just not bobble, but hang with me. It's gonna be all right. The mansion complex is really gorgeous, and the Historical Society does great programming all of the time, so keep an eye out for more of that information as we go. He's tempted me upstairs, so let's see what we got.
Okay, that was the maid's room, and this is the girls' bedroom. The girls, of course, slept in both rooms.
Right. So this is the maid's quarters he was talking about before.
Yes.
Spindle and the sewing wheel in the corner.
Yes, and then I'm going to go to the right, and I want you to go to the left a little bit. You'll be able to see into William Kirksig's small bedroom.
Okay.
This door was not here at the time. I'm sorry. This door was not here at the time. That's William Kirksig's room.
Very nice. It is quite small.
Yeah.
All right.
The guest room we talked about. And I might point out the quilt is called a crazy quilt. And it would have been made from remnants of shirts or jackets or jeans the girls made. And the remnants would be sewn together in these quilts. And it was also a way to learn stitching. My wife, who has done a lot of different kinds of stitching, says you can see almost every kind of stitching there is in this quilt.
It's quite gorgeous. I've been stitching masks, and I don't think I have this kind of skill. Beautiful headboard, too. Do ask questions if you have them, everybody. What's this?
That's a hair wreath. During during that period of time, women would comb their hair or brush their hair at night, and they would put the hair that was collected in their brushes in small containers like this. And when they died, that hair would be used to make hair wreaths as a memorial for those who had died. So
Wow.
that was a woman's hair, and she, of course, was deceased. It's called a hair wreath.
Very neat.
And this is the first bathroom we were talking about. You'll notice that it does have a stool, and the pipe ran from the tank. There was a tank in the ceiling, still there, and rainwater would be collected into that tank, and if you push the button, the water would scour this little tub. Of course, there was no plumbing, and so you still had to have somebody to carry the refuse out at the end of the next morning at the end of the day.
That's very neat.
And this
Oh,
is
the
John
desk.
Quincy Adams's desk. It belonged to him. It was found in a barn in Roxbury, Massachusetts, on property the Adamses owned after Adams was dead. But the copy on the top of the desk is interesting because it's a bill for shipping that was signed by John Quincy Adams' Secretary of State, Henry Clay, and that's owned by the owner of Comstock Castle Stove Company now. But he has lent it to us because of the relationship of these two men. This wouldn't have been here. That's like a Jenny Lind bed. It was of the 1860s or 70s, but it wouldn't have been a wood house. So this was the boys' room. It's been changed to accommodate that desk, but it is the boys' room. A feature that I want to make sure that I show you are these
Yeah, they're
the
gorgeous.
woodwork and the medallions and the rosettes and so on and so forth. If you keep in mind the house was built in 1835, it meant it was built before power. There was no electricity, no power tools. So all of this elegant woodwork was done by hand. And John Wood asked young men, New Orleans and St. Louis, who were coming over from Germany to help him build the house. And for that, he provided to them property on his south acreage. And it was called Deutschenstadt, or Germantown. Today we call it Calf Town,
Right.
because he also provided places for people to graze their cattle so they could have milk and so on for eating.
It's really gorgeous woodwork.
This
Oh, there's
is
the
my next favorite. These are the slippers that John Wood walked to Palmyra, which is about 20 miles south. He went down one day, I think came back the next, but in any case, on January 26th, these were the slippers, calfskin slippers he gave his wife, Anne, his new wife, Anne, and she wore them to the wedding.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's amazing that they are still with us. And some of her clothes are in this armoire. You'll notice that as we walk through the house, there were no closets to be seen. And the reason for that was that closets, if they were broader than your shoulders, were considered rooms and they were taxed. And so people like John Wood didn't build closets. He bought wardrobes or armoires instead, in which, and bureaus, of course, to store clothing rather than a closet.
That's somewhat common in a lot of Quincy's historic homes, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
The wooden shutters are original to the house. The valances, which are wood also, are original. These hair pieces did belong to Mrs. Wood. The glass of ice is there because John Wood loved ice. And there was ice in Quincy at the time when the river froze. There were actually companies that would cut huge blocks of ice and store them in the caves just south of Quincy, where the temperature was around 57 degrees all year round. And so they could put the ice in there, put hay on it, and keep it cold and maintain ice throughout the year.
Some hat pins. Very cool.
And finally, the bed itself was given to the Woods by Willard Keyes, who was John Wood's partner in many things in Quincy, business primarily, but religion and so on and so forth. But in any case, gave this canopy bed to the Woods.
And it's quite tall. I don't know if you can tell from the video here. It just stretches floor to ceiling.
Yeah, the ceilings in here are 11 and a half feet.
Wow. Are they're asking about the wallpaper. Is the wallpaper?
Yeah, the wallpaper we've seen is what's called documented wallpaper, which means this is the paper that was in the house originally. And documented wallpaper means that the original was reproduced to look just like the original did.
It's gorgeous. It's got blues and greens in it. I hope you can see that in the video here. I'm gonna come up with a little close up on it. A little daisy pattern, and some key on the balances as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can probably tell, we're facing 12th Street here.
Right, we're facing west.
Okay.
And at the time, 12th Street was actually called State Street. And to our south, the south side of the property was Burton Road. So at some point they became 12th and State, but in any case, Burton Road ran toward Burton to our east.
All right. Is there anything else upstairs you'd like to point out?
No, we might get a picture. Well, we might get a picture here of
The stairwell.
Keyes. There's a portrait of Willard Keyes. And Willard Keyes was about as silent or quiet as John Wood was gregarious and loud. Someone asked one time if John Wood was in town, and he was answered, yes, he was. And the guy said, how do you know? And he said, I heard him whispering from the other side of town. And that was just John Wood, quite gregarious guy. He had lots of friends, and of course he was the guy who built and designed and gave Woodland Cemetery to the city of Quincy. And when he was buried there, they say there were thousands along the route from the church to the cemetery when he was buried there. He lived a ripe old age. He was born in 1798 and died in 1800, so he would have been 82 years old.
Wow. So we are not going over to the other areas of the property, but tell me about what else is on the property, just for visitors once things kind of open back up.
Yeah. One thing on the property to see is the so-called livery. And in the livery is Quincy's first fire engine, which is owned by Bill Avercamp of Quincy, and Bill has lent it to the Historical Society for display, along with some marble plaques and other artifacts. I think there was a Chris Craft boat, a wooden boat from the 1950s that's in the livery. It's an interesting thing to see. The other thing that's most important, I think, is the Lincoln Gallery in the Visitor Center. The Lincoln Gallery includes a lot of artifacts from the age of Lincoln, including his own Lincoln artifacts, and the age of Douglas in Quincy, and those around them at the time. The Ralstons, the Benisons, the Jonases, the Brownings, of course, the Bushnells, but also artifacts from the assassination, which we talked about, which happened on this date, April 14th. The hood of Lewis Powell, one of the assassins, is in the Lincoln Gallery, along with the keys that went to the range and cell that in which Mary Surratt, who was also a conspirator, is there. And then The manacles of Henry Azarat, who was another of the conspirators, is there. Those came to Quincy after the assassination. Browning, of course, had been a U.S. Senator in Washington, also the Secretary of Interior for Andrew Johnson, and Johnson's personal attorney. So he had access to those things, and he brought those things back to Quincy. And they're unique, they're priceless, they're a part of the history that we know today in the saddest day of our nation's history here at the Lincoln Gallery. There are also plates, utensils, and other things that the Lincolns had in Washington. So it's an incredible small space of a collection of Lincoln memorabilia.
Very nice. Well, I think we might leave it there so you guys can check out more. How can people help support the HSQAC during this time?
Well, number one, become a member. And membership is only, I think, $30 a year, and that entitles you to tour the place. It entitles you to do research if you have an interest in doing that. The society has a wonderful library of old Quincy documents and books. I do a lot of research myself, and I use that frequently. And so you have a lot of benefits from becoming a member. The second thing is to donate. The society does a good job of maintaining this old house. It takes money to maintain this old house, but the more members, the more donors, the better. As I say, it was once scheduled for demolition in 1907, and the first two members of the Quincy Historical Society prevented that, and we're standing in what they preserved for us and for our posterity. So join the society, come. There's a wonderful place to buy material and documents and so on and so forth at the Historical Society Museum at the 4th and Main Street, which is about half mile from here.
That's right. I love the gift shop in the museum. It's always got something interesting and unique it's hard to shop for folks on your list.
Yeah.
Once again, the website is hsqac.org. You can always find information on the Historical Society and all of their programming on Arts Quincy, and we'll shine a light on it as we start to reopen, whenever that may be. We will absolutely be carrying all of that as well. And we'll have links up underneath this video. We'll leave this video up. If you have more questions for Reg, I'm sure he'll check out the comments in the video as well. Just want to do a big thank you to you.
Yes.
It is terrific to hear all of this amazing, I've been through the mansion several times and I learned a lot today. So love this place, and the Historical Society does an amazing job of keeping that up. If you have been following Arts Quincy, we had a partnership with the Historical Society scheduled for this time of year for the 100th anniversary of suffrage. We will reprogram that whenever we're able to, but of course, 100 years since women gained the right to vote, and we'll be doing some pieces along with that. With that, I think we'll say adieu, and thank you so much for taking us through the house.
Thanks for coming. Good to be with you.